Hello, and welcome to a new episode of the Subjectively Correct podcast, a monthly podcast where two guys discuss different movies based on a theme each time. Those two guys are me, Josh, and my buddy Matt.
That's me.
And this month, we're talking about movies with notable soundtracks.
Indeed.
As in, well, right up front, I'd like to say this does not necessarily include musicals because we've got that down as a separate category altogether. And I'm sure there are people out there who might think of a soundtrack and think that, well, obviously a musical is going to be better than anything else. But we're not doing that. We're doing just straight up, movie scores.
Yeah.
And we've got a couple of quite different ones, I'd have to say.
For sure, yeah.
And quite apart from each other in time.
Also to almost 100 years, yeah.
Yeah. So, Matt, why don't you kick us off and tell us about the movie that you've brought this month, which is an oldie and a goodie and a bit of a callback to a previous episode as well.
Yeah, in a way, it's a callback to two previous episodes, actually. So, I brought Dracula from 1931, which is the oldest movie adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula. And I believe the first vampire movie after Nosferatu. So it's directed by Todd Browning, who has made a couple other notable films, like Freaks in 1932 is regarded as a classic. The Unknown in 1927 with Lon Chaney is one I like personally a lot. But I think Dracula is like his big movie, the one that Todd Browning is remembered for, if anything. It's starring the iconic Bela Lugosi, who was a mainstay in Universal horror films all around. I believe Dracula was probably his breakout role, and after that he was often like typecast as either literally a vampire again and again, or just like a similar mysterious weirdo, that sort of thing, the quiet type.
I'd just like to interject here.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at our notes on this, and there's a movie called Bela Lugosi Meets a Brooklyn Gorilla.
Yeah, I think Bela Lugosi. Yeah. Bela Lugosi, I think, really got like a celebrity status quick after Dracula, and so he even became like an archetype in like parodies and stuff. And yeah, there was an actual movie called Bela Lugosi Meets a Brooklyn Gorilla that I haven't seen, but it is part of like a horror parody series, I believe, that had multiple movies that deal with like universal horror themes. And yeah,
wild.
It's one of the greatest titles in movie history, I'm sure.
Fantastic.
Anyway, yeah, and sorry. I guess here's one of the first connections to a previous episode, because Bela Lugosi also starred infamously in Plan 9 from Outer Space, directed by Ed Wood. And we have talked in a previous episode about Tim Burton's movie, Ed Wood, where that was a big part of the plot. Ed Wood's encounter with Bela Lugosi and their work together. Probably gonna go back to that later, because I do have a question about your experience now actually having seen Bela Lugosi for the first time, really. But let's talk about it later. Other people starring in this movie: Dwight Fry, one of my favorites in here, who also starred in the Boris Karloff Frankenstein movie around the same time, where in that one he plays the weirdo like assistant to Dr. Frankenstein. So he's around
so
in
some. Igor in Frankenstein.
I don't think he's called Igor in the movie. I think he's called like Fritz or something. But yeah, it's the Igor type. Yeah, it's the Igor role. Also starring Edward Van Sloan as Van Helsing, who is also in other Universal monster films like Frankenstein and the Mummy. And starring Helen Chandler, Francis Date, David Manners, and a couple others in minor roles. Apparently, the script was written by a million people that I've never heard of, and I don't think have made anything other notable thing. Dudley Murphy, Frederick Stefani, Louis Stevens, Garrett Ford, Louis Bromfield, and the director Todd Browning himself. I don't know how the script writing process worked back in the 30s. I guess maybe that was just a group effort back in the day.
Yeah, it was probably like a studio-driven thing. Like,
Yeah.
the studio decided, let's make a Dracula film, and they just got a bunch of writers to put it together and so on and so forth.
The reason why this is here in the soundtrack episode, it got a score, or at least the version we watched, it got a score composed by Philip Glass. The original movie is quiet as heck. Aside from a Swan Lake song in the intro sequence, the original version of the movie does not have any soundtrack.
Right.
I made Josh watch the movie with the score made by Philip Glass in 1999. So that was made 68 years after the movie. But it seems like that soundtrack has been kind of like canonized, if that's the right word, because like official releases use that soundtrack these days. And Philip Glass is a big name in like the realm of movie composers. Here's a second connection to a previous episode. We talked about the documentary Jiro Dreams of Sushi in a previous episode, and that had a couple tracks by Philip Glass. I remember pointing it out in the episode because I was hyped to hear that music. And here is again Philip Glass. Dracula, the plot, if I need to like recite what that is about. It is about a soulless, blood-sucking, immortal creature living in Transylvania who hypnotizes and enslaves a British real estate agent to travel with the help of him over the pond to London, where he wreaks havoc on the locals, especially one family whose daughter Mina he wants to seduce. And they, of course, begin to notice strange things. And Dr. Van Helsing is around and notices this guy might be a vampire, needs to be stopped. And that is the plot of the thing. It's a very quiet, dramatic, theatrical movie as things were produced back in the day. That's the style of the time. And Bela Lugosi, who came from stage performances, very much gives a theatrical performance for Dracula, which worked so well that his performance here basically became the blueprint for all Dracula depictions in pop culture from there on out. When people quote Dracula with, "I want to suck your blood," they basically copy the cadence of Bela Lugosi's like Eastern European accent and stuff.
Well, and this film is where a lot of those famous quotes come from as well, like, you know, "I never drink wine," and "Listen to the children of the night," and, you know, all that kind of stuff. But
that quote,
which I've heard many times, obviously. Like, all those quotes are just ubiquitous, really.
Yeah, I love Bela Lugosi. I still love him. I used to be a huge fanboy of him. I remember reading like a 600-page biography about the guy one year, and dude, I was huge into his life for a while. But he's not the only good performance in this, I feel. Dwight Fry, who here plays Renfield, who becomes, you know, basically the slave of Count Dracula and goes through the craziness, loses his mind, wanting to eat bugs and babbling on about weird shit. I absolutely adore his performance. There's this one iconic scene, I think, when the ship they take to London arrives in the UK, and the people find Renfield with his creepy, weird laugh at like the inside of the ship, the bow of the ship, or whatever you call it. And it's just this image of him standing at the bottom of the stairs, staring straight into the camera and having this weird laugh. It's one of my favorite like visuals in classic horror in general. It's so good. The atmosphere is so good in this movie, in my opinion. And of course, since back in the day, movie making was all still reeling from theatrical acting, there's lots of really dramatic reciting of the lines, and a lot of the dialogue is also like poetic in a way. People really go off on tangents with like really flowery prose that nobody would actually talk in that way. But it all adds to the atmosphere in a really coherent way. And the soundtrack, which is the reason we are talking about this today. So the original movie is super quiet, no score, and that lends it its own effect. This movie being like really quiet works for the story as well, and that is the way that I watched this the first couple times and already loved it. But then one day when I had some Blu-ray that included the Philip Glass soundtrack, and I actually started watching that version, it kind of blew me away the first couple times, because I think I've rarely seen a movie score that genuinely elevates a movie just through its addition, like this score does. I mean, obviously a movie score is probably always created after the film has at least partially been filmed. And so, of course, the movie is like an answer to the visuals most of the time. I feel like, though, in this, it is kind of turned to 11, because I feel every bit of the string orchestra is like closely underlining the actions and the dialogue in the movie. It really goes hand in hand. It follows the movie so strongly that it just makes it even stronger. There's one scene when Dracula and Renfield first meet in the castle, and the iconic sentence of "I am Dracula" is called. The string orchestra has these quiet spots between the explosions of string, and it's also paced so perfectly. I am Dracula in one of those quiet spots, and then right as the sentence stops, it explodes in the string sound. It's just such a great question and answer play between movie and soundtrack. And I just adore this movie. I watched this probably for like the 20th time or whatever, and I feel like I like it more every time I watch this. And although I do miss the Swan Lake intro sequence, which is iconic in its own right and not in the Philip Glass version, I really do feel like this late score edition completely elevated this movie from something that was already great to something that's maybe perfect in my eyes. This is an incredible movie to me. Yeah, I have several questions about your experience of this movie. You've never watched the original quiet version. You only know the soundtrack version now. And
True.
I believe this is the first time you've actually watched a Bela Lugosi film. So I really want to hear about that.
I've seen bits and bobs of especially this film before, just in pop culture, as you do, because it is such a classic in that sense. And it is referenced so much, and people do, like you say, it is the template for Dracula.
Yeah.
And anyone hamming it up and doing a bit of Dracula just copies this film kind of thing. So, yeah, I'm definitely familiar with the content, even though I've never actually watched it from front to back. But now that I have, like I say, I know where all those lines come from. I know where all those references are from. And, it's interesting as well because recently, like in the last few weeks, not for any reason, like I didn't mean to or anything, but I just happened to rewatch Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Oh, yeah.
Like the movie from 1992 with Keanu Reeves and Winona Ryder and all that. And, it's a different movie altogether. We're not going to talk about that very much. So, but it was cool having watched that recently and then to watch this one because they're both based on the same book in that sense, like the same version of Dracula kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's not like a newer take on it. The story is quite similar in a lot of ways, even though it's quite different. But the portrayal of Dracula is actually quite similar, I think, even though they do have noted differences. But it is that kind of more theatrical, over the top, kind of melodramatic Dracula kind of character. Yeah. It's not very subtle in that sense.
Oh, definitely not.
And to that end, the other thing that I noted when I watched this was, unsurprisingly, yes, this is almost 100 years old. So it is dated in many, many ways. And, but having said that, it's not like I've watched some films that are even 30 years old and they're dated and they're hard to watch because of it. This, however, was easy to watch and enjoyable to watch.
Nice.
And yeah, there were some parts where you're like, yeah, okay, this is, you're going on a bit too much, or, it is a bit over the top. Well, it's goofy as fuck, really, because of how over the top it is at times. And like the repeated kind of shot of Bela Lugosi as Dracula just kind of staring at whoever, like
with the glowing eyes. It's amazing.
Yeah, there's this big thing about his eyes and how otherworldly they are and inhuman they are, and so there's lots of shots of just him staring, like a madman.
He has a good face, though.
Yeah, and it's cool, but it's a little bit goofy as well. Like,
but it works when there's some scenes where he literally just stares at a person, doesn't say a word, but there is some communication going around soundlessly. I remember one scene where Dracula visits Renfield in the asylum and just stares at Renfield, and Renfield goes pleading, "Don't make me do this, don't make me do this." And that's like the stuff with Lugosi just standing around that really, really works.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's where it's at its strongest. But yeah, there are sometimes like, the whole, when he does kind of attack people, it's very old school theatrical.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Where he kind of like puts his hand up and drags them off screen very, very slowly.
Yeah.
And that's cool. That's what I mean. It's all good though, because yes, that it's dated because of that stuff, but it's still enjoyable anyway to watch. It's not like it prevents it. It doesn't, it doesn't trip over itself like some things do.
Yeah.
And also, as someone who's coming from, I grew up I was in school in the 90s and the 80s. And so Interview with the Vampire was a big vampire influence for me, as far as, getting into the whole vampire thing, way before any of this Twilight bullshit or anything like that. Bram Stoker's Dracula as well was, while I was in school, and I remember watching it when I was a kid and being scared. So these are the kind of influences I've got beforehand. And I always like the idea of how Dracula has this kind of charismatic hold over people. Yeah. Where, he's freaky as fuck, but he can basically mind control people because he's so influential in that sense. And, he has that kind of power over people. So I like that they leaned into that in this movie as well, because I just dig it. So I just like that idea of Dracula. But yeah, the soundtrack, and this might sound like not necessarily a biggest compliment, although it is, but having not seen the film without the Philip Glass score, so I've got nothing. I've got no frame of reference for that. So so watching it with the score, I actually at no point felt like the score wasn't meant to be there. Like, it felt as natural as anything. Yeah. Even to the point where some parts I forgot that it was there because it just seemed like part of the film, Like, nothing really outlandish, which is good, because part of me was kind of expecting, a composer having done a score in 1999, it would be too modern for the film. Mm-hmm. It'd be like if someone did it in the 80s, they'd probably put some synthesizers in there and shit when it's like a 1930s film. So I was happy that it stuck to, just a stringed kind of instrument orchestra composition that's felt very accurate or authentic, I guess, for the time. Yeah. Yeah. Even though it was made way later. And so with that in mind, it did, complement the film quite a lot. And like you say, it does punctuate certain scenes and sequences and that very well, because obviously that's what it's been made to do. And I was kind of half expecting it to, like I say, just even be a little bit detached just from because of the time difference.
Mm-hmm.
But I think one of the, biggest compliments I can say to it is that if you hadn't told me, I probably would have thought that it was just part of the film anyway from the start.
Yeah,
So,
I could see that, yeah.
That's a good thing in my book.
For sure.
But yeah, what did you want to know?
Well, I guess you've seen Bela Lugosi as played by
Martin
what's his
Landau?
name in Ed Wood? Yeah.
Yeah.
How did that compare?
I still think Landau did a great job.
Oh yeah.
Just because, yeah, they've got their differences, obviously, but it's also hard to say because it's not like I wouldn't say I've gotten to know Bela Lugosi as an actor or as a person or anything from this one film because he doesn't say much. It's one of those films like, yeah, he's the title character, but he's actually not in it or as much as other people. He doesn't say as much as other people, but the whole film is about him.
I guess so, yeah.
So, and that's cool. Like, that a lot of films do that. That's great. So, but it means that as an actor, I don't know if I really got much from Bela Lugosi in this film.
Damn.
Because there's not a lot for him to play with as far as range and all that kind of thing. So, it's kind of.
I mean, I feel like he is really good at both doing the charming, warm, talkative dude, but also like the cold, weird, quiet type. I think that's the range that he plays in this movie, and I think both of those extremes work really well for him. I think that's what I like about him.
I mean, in my mind, for this film, actually, and that's nothing against Bela Lugosi because he was great. But was it Dwight Frye who played Renfield?
Yes.
Yeah, he stole the show, man.
Yes, I like that. Okay, that's fine.
But his character, though, was a much more, he had a lot more to say. He had more dynamics in his role throughout the film. Like he starts off quite like just, a straight dude, and then he turns into this insane, Dracula worshipper kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so, he really stretched himself a bit for this role, I feel like. And it was easy to see that because his character went through such a huge change over the course of the film.
That's true.
And even I'm guessing Helen Chandler's the
Mina,
main woman at the end. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
She went through a few changes as well because she kind of had to switch between being normal and then being enthralled by Dracula and, going back to normal again and all this kind of stuff.
True.
So, and with that, to that end, like the dude who played Van Helsing,
Edward Van Sloan. Yeah,
like he did a fine job, but again, nothing that really was that exciting because it was pretty straight all the way through. So I didn't feel like he got the opportunity to do a lot of dynamic stuff with his acting either.
Oh, that's true.
That's what I mean. It's not a diss on these actors. It's more just the types of characters they were playing, and everyone did a good job, but without having seen them in other stuff or knowing I've seen them in other stuff, like, or having seen other Bela Lugosi films or that kind of thing, it's kind of hard to gauge a proper opinion, I think, when their characters haven't got huge amounts of range anyway in this film.
I believe. I want to say I guess you need to watch Bela Lugosi Meets a Brooklyn Gorilla to get his full range. But I believe, I'm afraid Bela Lugosi is actually like, since he was so typecast after this, he didn't really get the chance to really play out more of a range.
Well, interestingly, I do plan to watch Plan 9 from Outer Space, of course.
Yeah.
Which I know is not necessarily his best work. But
that's an understatement.
But it'll be interesting seeing that where it's kind of like at the end of his career as opposed to this, which is, him at the height of his career.
It's not even the end of his career, it's end of his life, dude.
Well, this is what I mean. Like,
yeah. I don't even know if
I learned anything from Ed Wood, he was like on the out when he did that. So
That's
it'd be
such
interesting
a
to see
sad
how
movie.
different he is, or that kind of thing. and knowing a bit about his life and stuff as well, like, yeah, I'm sure it'll be a different kind of experience.
Yeah. Yeah, you said you wanted to see Plan 9 ever since we did the Ed Wood episode. I'm glad
Yeah.
I got you to watch a proper Lugosi film before you do that. Fuck.
It's probably a good idea, yeah.
Yeah, it would have made me sad if that wasn't happening.
Yeah, Plan 9 is just basically a bit of morbid curiosity, really, because after watching Ed Wood, I'm like, I should actually see an actual Ed Wood film with all these people that he's referenced and all these characters and stuff, and see how bad it actually is. And I'm ready for it to be bad, so
I'm sure you would. Have you seen a bunch of Boris Karloff films before? Have you seen like Frankenstein and whatever?
Yeah, well, again, like I think I've seen most of that Frankenstein, like Karloff's Frankenstein, but I haven't ever sat down and watched it like front to back.
Oh yeah, that sort of thing.
I've seen like chunks of it here and there.
But so far, with your current experiences with both of these actors, are you Camp Lugosi or Camp Karloff? It's very important for this podcast right now. It's very important for me, for our friendship.
I mean, I'll have to say Lugosi then, won't I?
Okay, good. You made the right decision. Okay.
Yeah. Well, and to be fair, I've probably seen more Lugosi now than Karloff, as in completely.
Yeah.
Because I've never watched a whole Karloff film.
Damn.
But now I've watched an entire Lugosi film. So
a whole ass Lugosi film.
It's all crazy. 74 minutes of it or whatever.
Yeah.
That's what the most jarring part of the film is actually the end for me, because it happened really quickly.
Very abrupt, yeah. But I think that's just
kind of, again, part of the age as well. Like,
exactly, yeah. They love to do that shit.
They get to the end and they're done.
Yeah.
And that's it.
There's no
end screen
epilogue.
and see you later. There's no like drawn out third act or something that wraps everything up. It's just like, yep, spoilers. They kill Dracula, done. Literally within like 5 minutes.
And since you already have the credits in the beginning at those days, like after that it's like literally black screen, the end, that's it. There's nothing to like ruminate on the story. You're just done. It's over. Yeah. Yeah, like
so
that.
it's cool, I love that sort of thing, just to see, well, like you say with the credits thing, like these days you never see credits at the beginning of movies.
Yeah, not like this.
Whereas that's the extreme opposite. Like when I was growing up, there was still credits at the beginning, but they weren't anywhere near as dense as the ones at the beginning of this film.
It's not literally every person on set,
Yeah, nowadays you might not even get a titles card or something at the beginning of a film. Like,
true.
Sometimes the film ends and then it shows you the title.
Yeah. Oh, this is what I'm watching, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I like that, to be honest. But
actually, I would. Since you mentioned the 90s Keanu Reeves Bram Stoker's Dracula movie.
Yeah.
If you had to pit them against each other, which one would you prefer?
I mean,
I feel like the 90s one is kind of divisive. People like to fight about that one.
Yeah, there's a lot about, like, Keanu Reeves' accent is a good one. Reason not to like that film.
Right.
Because he does an English accent that isn't that great.
Yeah. And the really eccentric presentation of the whole thing, yeah.
I think I really like that Dracula. And I love this whole thing they do with like the shadows and everything, like showing his real intentions and all this kind of stuff. And I love the over the top look that he has with the huge hair and the big cloaks and everything. And but then I like how the film goes into a second half where he's young again, and I think there's definitely more in the 90s Bram Stoker's Dracula. Like, it's a longer film.
Yeah,
there's way more going on.
But more isn't immediately better. That could just be clutter and bloat. 1931 had it.
I agree.
Concise and down to the point.
It was mercifully short. Yes.
Yes.
No, I liked it. I don't think they can be compared really, because I think I'd hate to say one is better or, the definitive version or you shouldn't see the other one because you should see this one. Like, you should see both, in my opinion. Like,
No, I disagree.
But they're different takes on Bram Stoker's Dracula. So,
yeah.
If you're into it, I would say, I'm happy I've seen both of them, put it that way. As someone who is into it but never actually saw the original, I'm glad now I've seen the original.
Yeah.
And I liked it. I didn't love it. It wasn't the best film I've ever seen.
Fair enough, yeah.
But I liked it for what it was, and with a good dollop of understanding that this was made 100 years ago. So
yeah,
things have changed since then.
No more vampires around now.
Yeah, well, and it's the kind of thing maybe in a few years I'd be keen to see the original version without the soundtrack, just to, see what that vibe is. Because I can see how that could change it significantly, as soundtracks do. And, part of me with soundtracks, I feel like in general, a good movie soundtrack, half the time you don't know that it's there anyway.
Yeah.
But then you notice it when it's not there. So like a movie that doesn't have a score often does feel kind of weird, because we're used to always having some kind of music or ambient kind of soundtrack happening. And when it doesn't, it's usually on purpose and for a reason. And that stands out more because we're so used to having soundtracks. But in my view, that's what I love about soundtracks, is that they really do underpin everything that you're watching.
Yeah, a good one.
And kind of get directly to your subconscious without necessarily smacking you over the face with it. And I feel like that's kind of what this one did.
Here's the final question before we move on. There are scores that work really well for the movie, but maybe don't stand on their own, removed from the movie. With this one, the Philip Glass score, would you say you could see yourself listening to it outside of the movie?
I mean, honestly, no.
Shit. Why not?
Because, I mean, let me put it this way. I have a bunch of movie soundtracks in my music collection, which are, probably half of them are like basically a collection of pop songs or whatever,
right,
that have been put together for a soundtrack. Like Tarantino movies are, there's some good soundtracks, but they're all, just a selection of cool songs and that's it, kind of thing. Most of the original scores that I listen to regularly are often, like I think I might have said it last time or another time, but they're often usually scores that are perhaps from a different culture. Like I've got a few martial arts films that I listen to their soundtracks a lot because I really like the, traditional Chinese music or something, or, there are other versions of that as well. And so when it's a straight kind of, like this one is it's as good as it is, it's a straight Western stringed instrument soundtrack.
Yeah.
And, as much as I like that as well, and I do listen to classical music from time to time, and, it's in my wheelhouse, I'm not rushing out to find a copy of this soundtrack to add to my collection.
Thanks.
Not that I'm opposed to it, but I didn't hear it and go, oh, damn, I need that.
I do. I don't buy music physically, but I have been listening to the soundtrack on streaming a ton over the years. It's one of my faves.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I listen to this all the time. Yeah. It rules. Okay. I think we blabbered on enough about this old-ass dusty vampire story. So I guess it's time. Oh, actually, I guess we still got to give the rating before you forget about that.
Oh, yeah.
Real quick.
So I reckon this is, I mean, it's a bit of a cop-out, I suppose, but I think this is a solid like 3.5 out of 5, like a 7.
Fair enough.
I might go to like an 8 if I think about it harder, because I do appreciate what it is in its own time, and I do recognize it as a stone cold classic, and watching it you can see why.
Yeah.
So, I'd probably go 7 or 8 out of 10.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's probably as far as I go. What about you? Is this
Yeah.
like a solid 5, like 10 out of 10? Or?
It's getting there. Like currently, the last time I watched this, I gave it an 8 out of 10. But like I said, every time I watch this movie, I like it more. And it has been rising in my rating over the years already. And I believe it's time for me to give it another pay raise. It's probably gonna hit the 9 out of 10 this time. And I'm expecting it to get to the 10 out of 10 in a couple more years, to be honest. I love this movie so much. Yeah.
The Dracula inflation.
Yeah. Okay, so
cool.
Moving on to another soulless manipulative creature with your movie Ex Machina from 2015.
Yeah, it's actually 2014.
Is it? Letterboxd says 15. So
Letterboxd says it's 15, but it actually was released in 2014.
All right, fair enough then.
I think if it's like end of the year versus beginning of the year, sometimes Letterboxd gets confused. But anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, I chose the film Ex Machina from 2014. Just as an aside, as soon as we saw this theme for the month, my first thought was Blade Runner, because that is the greatest movie soundtrack ever made, in my opinion, by Vangelis. And that is the soundtrack I listen to a lot. But I know Matt's seen Blade Runner, so I thought, I'll bring something he hasn't seen just to make it more interesting.
I'd watch it again.
And seriously, I love it that much that I was very much considering saying, hey, let's just do Blade Runner anyway.
Did you then intentionally choose another movie with a similar theme? Or was that just coincidence?
No, actually.
Okay.
I only just thought about that now.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah.
Yeah.
Ex Machina, for those of you who are not aware, it was kind of a big deal when it came out in 2014-15. It's directed and written by Alex Garland, who the main thing he's done, which I recognize and also love, is the movie Annihilation.
Yes.
Which is an adaptation of a series of books, but I really love that movie as well, so doesn't surprise me that I like this one. It stars Domhnall Gleeson.
Heck yeah.
Who is one of those dudes you might recognize but not necessarily know. He's been in Harry Potter, he's been in Star Wars, he's been in The Revenant, he's been in a bunch of big movies. Just like Alicia Vikander, who's been in The Green Knight and Tomb Raider, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., Oscar Isaac, who I think is probably the most well-known name in the cast. He was in Dune, Star Wars, Spider-Man, X-Men. He was also in Annihilation. Just as Sonoya Kitsuno, who was also in Annihilation, and she's also been like La La Land and Crazy Rich Asians, etc. There are some other actors in the film, but these are the main 4. And if really Sonoya Kitsuno is in it consistently, like she's definitely there, but it's really like a 3-person film or a 3-character film, the whole film. The soundtrack is composed by Jeff Barrow and Ben Salisbury, who I looked up a bit and basically found out they also did Annihilation. So I feel like Alex Garland, when he wrote and, was putting together Ex Machina, he kind of got a bunch of actors he's worked with before, got the composers he's worked with before.
Actually, it wasn't Annihilation guys later.
Let's all do it. Was it? Oh, okay. Well, maybe it's the other way around then.
Yeah.
So yeah, one way or the other.
Yeah.
It's obviously a team who like working together. So, and for my money, they're very effective. So the basic story of Ex Machina is that Domhnall Gleeson's character called Caleb is like a tech guy who works for a tech company, and he gets the opportunity to go stay with the very enigmatic Oscar Isaac's character Nathan, who is the head of said tech company, but he lives like in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a forest, and in a house that's all secure and no one can ever get to, and all this kind of thing. And he's kind of portrayed as this almost like a Steve Jobsy kind of character, like he's the cool tech genius who runs the company and is a billionaire and doing all this funky stuff, but I would argue probably more interesting than a Steve Jobs kind of character.
Yeah.
But so Caleb goes to visit him and stay with him for a week, and the reason behind this is that Oscar Isaac's character Nathan has built an AI entity, robot, for want of a better word, played by Alicia Vikander, whose name is Ava. And he wants Caleb to basically run a Turing test on Ava to determine if she has her own consciousness and is sentient or not, and, you know, so on and so forth. And so the film goes on where Caleb is interviewing Ava a lot to ask her questions and get a feel for, you know, what she thinks and how she functions and all this kind of stuff. But then it gets very quickly into a bit of kind of almost like thriller territory where we start to question why he's there in the first place and what Nathan's intentions are. And we discover that Ava, as an AI, probably doesn't want to be there anyway in the first place. And whether she's manipulating things for her own gain and all that kind of thing. And, you know, spoilers ahoy.
Yeah.
Everything kind of goes to shit in the end. And you know, everyone's kind of double-crossed everyone and manipulated each other for their own gains in one point or another. And throughout the time, Caleb kind of, in dealing with determining if this AI is sentient or not, he starts to question his own kind of, he has a little existential crisis of his own and starts to question his own humanity and things and starts to kind of dissociate a little from his own, what he knows to be reality, because he's essentially in this completely foreign and unreal situation in this high-tech house with this AI and this billionaire dude who's a bit wacky and a bit out there, but perhaps a bit cruel as well, because we find out very quickly that Nathan, Oscar Isaac's character, as the creator of this AI, he's built others as well, and that's where Sonoya Kutsuno's character comes in. She's another AI that he's built who perhaps isn't as advanced as Ava, but is very much around. And we find out that Nathan basically doesn't really have much of an emotional attachment to these creatures that he's created, or these potentially sentient beings that he's created. And he's very much a narcissist, and he's all about himself, and he's full of ego. And, you know, basically there's a line in there somewhere where he's like, oh, I'm a god, and, you know, I'm basically creating life. So aren't I fantastic? But then, you know, at the same time, Ava is kind of the opposite of that, which is interestingly, because she is artificial, but she ends up being more the antithesis to that, because she gets very emotionally manipulative and kind of connects with Caleb's character in such a way that he then feels for her. And, you know, the ending of the film, I think, is an interesting thing, which we can talk about later. But to get back to soundtrack as well, just in this like kind of elongated intro, what I love about the soundtrack in this film is that it does a few different motifs, which I really enjoy. So, and it plays with those a bit to kind of like fuck with your head a little, because like the first time we see Ava as the AI, the soundtrack that's playing is almost very kind of delicate and kind of childlike in a way, to reflect her own naivety and all that kind of thing. But then you get these like deep undertones, which are a little bit unsettling. And it's very much a kind of synthesized kind of soundtrack of ambient noises and that sort of thing. So it's not live instruments, at least it doesn't sound like it.
No, yeah.
And then when you go to Nathan's character and stuff, there's way more unsettling kind of intense score behind him. Or then there's a great dance sequence halfway through where it's just batshit crazy.
Yeah.
But it kind of, again, reflects him and how Caleb is kind of interacting with these other characters. And a lot of it along the way kind of also reflects Caleb's own grip on reality and his own existential kind of conundrum where he's kind of losing touch with his own humanity. And there's a really great crescendo at the end, basically, which we'll talk about in a sec. But I really love basically the soundtrack, how the end, like I watched this recently again just to remind myself. And yeah, the last like 15 minutes of the soundtrack to me is just like, perfection.
They stand out. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I'll stop rambling for now and I want to hear what you think, Matt. So
well,
hit me.
Yeah, I remember when Ex Machina came out. I do remember that it was kind of a big deal. Everybody was talking about that one. And my cynical ass was sitting there and not being interested at all at the time. I don't think this is a movie I would ever see if it wasn't for this podcast and for you making me see it.
Cool.
Because I think it's just a personal thing. The conversation about like AI and where does AI end and where does genuine life and consciousness begin. It's not an inherently uninteresting conversation, but I do feel like that is one of those subjects in fiction that's really played to death these days. And I feel like there are other stories that do it already very good, like you mentioned earlier, Blade Runner.
Yeah.
Both the movie, also the book by Philip K. Dick, and also there was the movie Her, if you remember that. That was also pretty well done in that whole scene. And so Ex Machina, I was kind of going into this in a cynical way, expecting it to kind of just hitting the base tones of that subject. And I mean, it is a very like small scale movie. It's literally a bottle movie with like free speaking roles. So of course it's very focused and reduced and whatever. So I kind of went in not expecting much innovation, to be honest. The one saving grace, I mean, that's a dramatic way to put it. But I mean, I like Annihilation as well. So seeing that it was directed and written by Alex Garland, I was interested in the like at least the dialogue writing and the presentation of the movie. And I do believe the writing and the performances of the actors is probably the thing that I'm gonna be remembering this movie for, if anything. I don't think the plot really, the plot itself doesn't really leave much of an impact to me, I think. There's a couple... yeah, I'm sorry. There's a couple gripes that I have with this kind of story, including the decision to make it two human dudes and then the android being a feminine character portraying a woman, which carries with it the inevitable like sexual tension and the gender roles shit. I mean, they specifically used that for the plot. The whole thing that Oscar Isaac's character also makes clear that she is absolutely fuckable. She's functionally sexually, and that whole thing that it's puts in the story this, in my opinion, lazy way to establish sort of like power dynamics that I feel like could be more interesting and nuanced if it wasn't based on like this gender stuff. Maybe I feel like maybe it would have been more interesting if the android was also either like genderless or like the same as the humans, portrayed as the same as the humans. The whole emotional manipulation from the android towards Caleb was also, in my opinion, too much based on romance or sexuality to really be interesting. I feel like that's the easy way out, in my opinion. That's the easiest way to do an emotional manipulation theme in a story with the romance and sexuality. And but what I do like is that in the end, it is left ambiguous if it was like how much of that was just manipulation by the android to get to her escape, and if there maybe
I don't
was.
think it's very ambiguous, is it?
I don't know. Maybe I want it to be ambiguous.
Like she very happily just basically betrays him and leaves him there to die.
That is true, but she doesn't actively murder him like the other guy.
That's why I think, like, obviously I disagree with you wholeheartedly, but
Yeah.
but I feel like each of these characters, if you look at the three of them, a lot of their roles in the film is to be contrasting characters of themselves, as in not only contrasting and reflective of the other characters who they're dealing with, but of themselves too. So Ava's progression starts off as this naive, kind of innocent girl who Caleb sees as flirting with him and, you know, using that as part of a way to connect with him.
Yeah.
But the reason it didn't bother me is partly because I think the fact that Nathan would build her that way seems right, because he's a bit of a misogynistic kind of narcissist anyway. So I don't think he would have any problem making an AI who's also sexually active and whatever.
Yeah.
So that fits for one. But then because of the way she ends the film, like to talk about the ending of the film, essentially Caleb tries to set Ava free, and in doing so, Ava does get free because she's ordinarily contained in this facility. But she eventually gets free and ends up killing Oscar Isaac's character along with Sonio Kutsuno, her AI character as well. They both kind of kill him together. And then Ava says to Caleb, you know, just wait here for a second, I'm going to get myself together. And she ends up locking him in the whole facility and leaving and going out into the world on her own.
Yeah.
And the reason I get to that now is because when she does that, I think it's very clear that she has no second thought for him once she's achieved what she needed to achieve. Like, she treats him kindly when she needs to and like softly says to him, oh, you know, just wait here, I'm going to get myself sorted or whatever. And she basically goes and makes herself look like a real person and, you know, all this kind of stuff, and gets ready to leave the place. And then as she leaves, she doesn't even look in on him or anything. She just kind of locks the door and says, see you later. Well, doesn't even say see you later, but just walks out and has a very blank expression on her face until she's outside. And then she actually starts to show some kind of enjoyment of the fact that she's now free. And it seems like she hasn't given Caleb a second thought at all. And so in my mind, that kind of also then justifies the earlier manipulation and all that kind of stuff, because we're meant to see her as this kind of innocent and naive entity at the very start of the film, when really she's the calculating, cold, emotionless AI that she is. And, you know, perhaps it's a bit of duality between her character and Oscar Isaac's character, who we then realize actually Oscar Isaac's character is a bit more human than we might think, and, you know, so on and so forth. And central to all that, I feel like, is Caleb. Like, this is a film more about Caleb's character than any of the others, because it's about him then falling into this trap and being manipulated by an AI to the point he starts questioning his own humanity. And there's a point where you can tell he's not sure if he's actually an AI or not, because he starts thinking, well, how would I know?
Yeah, that I liked. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think all those sorts of layers and everything for me make it work like super well. And there's more to it than it just being like a surface level kind of superficial, you know, robot story.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I was focusing on the wrong stuff, or my expectations were too high. Dude, part of me kind of like was almost afraid that it would just end up with a plot twist of Oscar Isaac being an android, and that would be the big reveal. It would be kind of funny, but probably not very. It would be probably more corny than good.
Yeah, I don't think that'd be good at all. Like, I think that'd be some real cheap shots. But to go back to the soundtrack as well, like I think the strongest part of the soundtrack is its crescendo at the end of the film.
Yes,
where when Ava and I think it's Kyoko is the other character's name, who's the other android.
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
When they basically kill Oscar Isaac's character, first of all, I love the way they do it, because they do it the way a machine would. Like, they don't stab him like fast and anything like a human would. They literally just kind of get a knife and slowly push it into his body and even turn it a little. And then the other one grabs the knife and slowly just pushes it into your body. Because you wouldn't need a lot of pressure. You just kind of need to put it in there, and that does the job. And it's actually quite confronting, I think, because it is so cold and slow the way that they do it. It's not like a fit of passion or anything. Yeah. But when that happens, the soundtrack just like kicks in, and there's certain themes and stuff that keeps coming up, and this one comes in and it's actually quite elevated and loud, and that continues almost through to the end, where when there's that confrontation, the soundtrack kicks in and it's quite intense, but then it drops off again as Ava's, once again appearing like an innocent or almost like a child again, as she kind of repairs herself and gets herself ready to go out into the world. But then that same motif, as Caleb realizes that he's actually been locked in and probably left to die, it crescendos and distorts and
a bit crushing.
It's almost like it's glitching a bit and all that kind of thing. And then it like ends in a huge crescendo of this distorted noise.
Yeah.
Which is heavily contrasted then with complete silence as Ava leaves the building and goes out into the world. And I just, that ending to me is like, so good. It gets me every time and like hits me in the feels like hardcore.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I agree. The soundtrack was, especially in that part, was really good. I liked it as well. In general, I like the soundtrack is very minimal for the most part, but it like fits with the clashing of the electronic minimal parts, and then but also more orchestrated things for the theme of Ava, which made for a good like mixing of technological themes and then more human things, which I get that the theme worked. And yeah, like you said, the final crescendo there really did the ultimate with the kalimba music box type melody that goes distorted, goes all digital in a way, and moves into chaos that fit the finale very well. I agree with that. I can't agree that it hit me in the feels, I don't think. The feels for who? For the android? Do you feel for the android? Is that the thing? Or the tragedy as a whole that's taking place?
I don't know about that as such. It's more just, I love a film about humanity and what it means to be human, which obviously, there's loads of sci-fi films or stories where at the end of the day they're talking about humanity and all that kind of stuff. I also love philosophy and existentialism and all that kind of stuff. Like, to me, those sorts of themes are always themes that hit really hard, like if they're done well. And I think they're done well here, obviously. And to me, that's where the film is less about AI or anything like that. It's more about these are not one note simple characters. Like, there are many layers and there's a lot of depth to each of them. And they all kind of, at one point or another, feel like they're outsmarting the rest, even though they're not.
True.
And, and that's where even like the dance scene with Nathan and Kyoko, where they do this awesome, might I say, disco dance.
Yeah.
Because, he's been drinking a bit and everything. And I forget the quote, but there's a good line where he basically says, chill out and just dance. I'm going to watch this. I'm about to cut up a rug or whatever. Like, I'm going to kill the shit out of this. But it's so absurd in the context of the rest of the film that, to me, it kind of is actually an important scene, because it kind of signifies just how, I think to Caleb as well, who was observing the whole thing happening, it kind of is the point where he realizes just how detached from reality the whole circumstance is. And Nathan as a character, how he stops looking up to him as this genius dude who he's excited to meet, and he starts thinking of him as a lunatic, because he is. And it's kind of, to me, that scene, as absurd as it is, kind of is a very important turning point in the whole film. And so, I love it. But I love a bit of absurdism as well. Like, this film hits so many notes for me. But I never even thought of comparing it to other films or anything like that either. So I feel like we came at it at a very different kind of angles.
I think so too.
Because I've seen those other films you mentioned, but I don't know. I prefer it to films like Her, or I really like Her. Don't get me wrong, that's a great film. But I feel like the depiction of AI and humanity in this in Ex Machina is much deeper and more complex than in Her, because Her is fairly one note. You know where it's going from the start, kind of thing. As much as I liked it, like I thought it was a great film.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, maybe the nuances went over my head, or I was looking for the wrong things and got stuck in my own focus or something. I mean, I didn't hate this movie. There was still, the performances were still great. I really liked all, I guess all four, but especially like the free speaking roles. They were all great.
Yeah, the main three. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, again, the general presentation of Alex Garland movies, I guess that's just like there's this through line of how these films are presented visually, and that is still true here. Also, shout out to that house this is set in, this uber fancy isolated building in the middle of nature with like glass walls and still the rocks from the outside being implemented in the living space and shit. That was gorgeous. It was a great location for a one location movie.
Well, exactly. And I kind of hate saying this because everyone says about everything, but this is one of those films where the location is very much a part of the story. I don't think it's as on the nose or like in your face as some other movies and stories, but yeah, the location does contribute, I think, to the story significantly. Because if you set this elsewhere, like if you think this was like an apartment in a big city, it would have a different vibe completely, because part of it is that seclusion and being cut off from everything and kind of being in that environment. Nathan is 100% in control, which, without a doubt, without any kind of ambiguity. And I think that's kind of part of it too, that, works into the story very much as well. But,
Yeah, for sure. No, I agree.
But what would you score it then?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. Can I ask ChatGPT what to score it? No.
Fuck.
that would be the ultimate cynical answer to this. No,
get ChatGPT to write a review for you as well.
That's it. That's the one. Shit. I think I'm ending up at like a 6 out of 10. Because I didn't hate this or whatever, but I guess like the grades didn't hit with me. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. I wish I had a better argument.
Yeah, well, there's no accounting for taste.
True.
I guess this wasn't like melodramatic and old school enough.
Not enough
Dracula.
theatrical acting with glowing eyes staring in the camera. Yeah. It was missing that.
Well, because this is a film that, I think I said it, I don't know if I said it when we were recording or beforehand, but I went to rewatch this thinking I probably won't dig it as much as I did the first time I saw it. Because I've seen it a few times, like 3 or 4 times, but I often expect to like films less the more I watch them. Yeah. Because most films, that's what happens. Like, you get used to it. All the bits that surprise you in the first instance kind of start surprising you less and less. Mm-hmm. But watching this film again now, I like it even more. Like, if I could go up from a 10, I would go up from a 10. But this is a stone cold 10 for me. Like,
shit, dude.
There is nothing I would change about this, and it hits all the right notes for me. Like, it just it excites me, kind of thing. Like watching this film and part of that. The reason I wanted to choose it was because of that soundtrack, where I feel like it's just the soundtrack kind of punches in a perfect kind of way and bolsters the entire film and the entire theme and vibe like perfectly without ever dropping the ball. And I just love it. It's so cool.
I guess just because we had the question with the other movie as well, I guess it makes sense to repeat it here. Would you listen to this one isolated? I think this
Absolutely.
one is... I thought this one might be even more tied to the movie than the Dracula one. But you would.
No, because I like these kind of chill ambient soundtracks.
Yeah, okay.
So I listen to this kind of music anyway. Like there's a few musical artists who make music like this soundtrack who I would listen to. Like I like a chill ambient electronic kind of bit of vibing music, for want of a better word. So, and actually when you were asking me about that for Dracula, I was thinking to myself, man, I got to find a copy of the Ex Machina soundtrack.
Yeah, you should, man.
So, I will. That's going to be my job after we're done here.
Hell yeah.
But I think the real question is,
oh God.
Would you rather be an immortal vampire having to suck the blood of your enemies or innocents around you, or a sentient AI with your freedom? You've escaped your prison of creation, and you're now out in the world surviving for yourself.
But who charges my battery? Like, where do I get my energy?
These are things to consider.
Fuck. I think blood is easier to come by. And okay, so I mean, in these movies, we have learned that both of these are good at manipulating people. But I think I would still put more money on the supernatural hypnosis of the vampire. Yeah, I believe I would get a cape and do a Bela Lugosi. I think I would rather be the vampire, actually, yeah. Also, I mean, turning into freaky little bats on strings. We didn't even talk about that.
I know, we should have.
The fucking bats on strings in the movie.
As an aside, like that's goofy as fuck.
So, yes.
And I get it. It's very much of the time. Like, the best kind of special effects they could do.
So funny, yeah.
It's so hilarious when you see the rubber bats flopping around.
In this really dramatic theatrical thing, yeah.
Well, and all the actors are like, what's that?
They're terrified.
And it's like a rubber bat just flopping onto the screen. Like it doesn't even look like it's flying because it doesn't flap its wings quick enough because it's literally a dude on a string just flopping it about.
So good. I would
choose the android.
I was about to ask. You would choose the
Any
android,
day.
really?
Hell yeah. Vampires can get killed in so many creative ways. Whereas I feel like the intelligence and abilities of Ava, if I had those, I could go far.
I mean, you can still get disassembled, or like an EMP would probably just knock you out and you're done.
And I'm encountering EMPs all the time, aren't I? So that is something to be worried about.
God damn it, man.
Like, just yesterday I got EMP'd again and I was like, gee, I'm so glad I'm not an android.
Right? You couldn't even get through the security gates at the airport. Like, what are you going to do?
Need to.
What, are you going to walk from a vacation destination to
I'm
vacation
an android.
destination?
I can do whatever I want. I'll fly my own plane.
I don't think an android immediately gives you access to a plane.
But I have the intelligence to get there.
Shit. I don't know about that. I can turn into a bat and fly to.
Yeah, but you're stuck. You're also stuck to like you're helpless during the day in a coffin.
Listen, I don't like the day anyway, so that doesn't really change much for me, to be honest.
Like when Van Helsing killed Dracula in the movie, he just kind of rocked up and did it. There was no resistance.
Yeah, it's true.
Because my dude didn't even realize it was happening.
Yeah.
At least I could put up a fight, maybe.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh wow.
Anyway, that's our choices for soundtracks this month, dear listeners. Let us know what you reckon. If you've seen these films, and if you're camp supernatural or camp sci-fi, let's call it that for now.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I guess it's time for me to spin the wheel of the next theme, huh?
Yeah.
Let's see what we're gonna be talking about. We are gonna be talking about cinematography. So I guess it's about the visual presentation next time instead of the oral presentation or whatever.
Nice. I like it. So something that's especially strong in its visuals, yeah.
Yeah, I have shit. But cinematography does mean
jump to mind.
You can't just put like a really really elaborate animated film, I guess. Or is that still cinematography when there's no camera?
say that could count because you still have to consider all those things. Like you still have to compose the shot.
I guess that's true, yeah.
And position a camera, even if it's a virtual one. I would accept that.
Fair
it's
enough,
not necessarily where I'd go,
no,
first.
Probably not. Shit. Yeah, that leaves the door open for a lot of possibilities again. There's not a lot of limits here with this theme.
Yeah.
I'll just bring Bela Lugosi meets the Brooklyn Gorilla. I'm sure that's good. All static cameras, probably.
Hey, that's kind of the point of this whole exercise, is to maybe be exposed to things that you wouldn't otherwise be exposed to. So
bring wavelength. Have you ever seen that infamous art film Wavelength? It's just one single shot zooming in slowly.
Interesting. Because have you seen Time Code?
No, I don't know what that is.
Oh, that's the screen is divided into 4 different shots. They're all single shots, and there's a movie. So if you think of there's 4 one-take shots.
Yeah.
And they're always on screen at all times. And the characters, play out the movie. And so the cameras follow different characters and stuff. Sometimes they cross over. So, characters there might be a couple of the shots are actually in the same scene, but it's one take. Okay. It's all shot on one single take, but there's 4 different cameras running at the same time.
That actually sounds awesome. I might look that up later. Yeah. Have you ever?
I'd recommend watching it anyway.
One more question. Have you ever seen Blue, where the movie is literally just a blank screen of blue, while the narration talks about going blind? I believe that's an interesting one.
I don't think I have.
That would be a funny one for the cinematography episode.
Yeah,
because there's 0. But yeah,
I can tell you, I don't think I'd be down with that.
That's too much. Okay.
Well, no, it's more just I do fall on the side of I'm a big supporter of abstract, surreal, absurd kind of art in whatever form, but I have to be convinced that there's a point to it.
Yeah, it's blue.
As in, even if it is pointless in the point. But there's a painting called Blue, which is literally just a blue painting where it's just blue. And it's very famous because it's just blue. Uh-huh. There's also a series of paintings, I forget who they were by, which are all black.
I think I know those ones, yeah.
Yeah, there's like 4 massive paintings that are just 100% black, and they stand in the gallery together. And I remember studying them when I was doing art history, and there's actually, I think, decent reasons behind why they were painted at the time and the point behind it. And I'm like, yeah, that's rad.
Yeah, the context,
blue one, I've yet to hear a good reason for it.
It's blue. Don't you like blue? It's a good color.
But at the same time, I'm kind of like, I kind of like it because it does make people go, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like that in itself is good reason. Anyway,
maybe maybe we'll find movies with that. That would be good.
Yeah. But
right,
I think that'll do us for today.
Yes.
Let's look forward to some visually stimulating experiences next time.
Heck yeah.
But for now, hit us up if you're listening and you got something to say. If you want to, I mean, we all need to let Matt know how wrong he is about Ex Machina.
Yeah. Throw your insults at me. I'm ready.
So by all means, I know he'll probably enjoy it a bit too much.
Maybe.
So yeah, maybe not. But see how you go. If you're feeling saucy, let us know just how right I am. So
yes, please.
But with that, I will say a goodbye. I'm done. See you later. Thanks for listening.
Goodbye.
And we'll catch you on the next one.
Exactly. See ya. Bye-bye.